It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, May 1st, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is taking a look at the defensive pairings from the beginning of the season versus the end of the season today.
That'll be fun.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Twitter, and Blue Sky as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. You can subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, as is often the case in the off season, the tiniest bit of news gets a lot of notice.
Sure.
For the Flyers. And that tiny bit of news, the last little bit, has been Sean Couturier, captain of the Flyers, got a new agent. So what does it all mean, Russ?
Well, I mean, there was that one time that John Tortorella said he heard from like a pissant or something, and apparently that was Couturier's agent. So now Couturier has changed agents. Pat Brisson is certainly not that. Not that the other guy was. He wasn't. So he'll be formidable to go and tell John just exactly how Sean feels and probably how he should be treated. And Danny knows Pat, and either they'll work it out or he'll work his way out of town somehow. But it's not going to be easy to trade Sean. So this is Sean showing that he's not happy. That's why I told you, no matter, you could say whatever you wanted to say at the end of that season, and he was going to have a brave face, but he got disrespected as the captain of this team. It's just plain and simple.
Yeah, and he's an agent that has like top guys like Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, John Tavares, Dylan Larkin. Like there's
Nick Sealer and Cam York too. Just to mix
sure.
them in.
Claude Giroux is on that list
as
well. And there's a lot of top guys. There's a lot of up and coming guys on his roster of players. So he does have a lot of bargaining power in the NHL. And I think that will change the dynamic for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're hoping. It's not like he's going to make some real money from this. He's really just probably feels bad for Sean and wants to help him out.
Yeah.
Or I think help out Danny, either one way or the other.
Yeah, it is interesting. If you look at his, the top NHL teams in his portfolio, I believe the Flyers are 6th or so on his list of how many contracts he's managed. So
yeah, I'm sure the Canadians are number one.
Yeah, I don't know, but
pretty sure. But the Penguins too. Obviously, Sidney Crosby, like you said.
Yeah. Yesterday on the show, we previewed the Lehigh Valley Phantoms round 2 playoff series in the AHL versus the Hershey Bears. If you haven't listened, go back and do that. The series starts tonight in Hershey. We got word that they're getting even more reinforcements to Hershey from the Capitals, which is unfortunate for the Phantoms.
Yeah, they dropped the bomb yesterday.
So Hendrix Lapierre, who's been huge on Hershey, we've seen him time and time again be a dominant player at the AHL level. Ivan Miroshnichenko, huge prospect in the Caps system, and a lot more as well. So it's going to be a tough matchup.
Yeah, that makes it a lot tougher. And, for those people that want to see where the Flyers are at prospect wise, well, you're going to see, because, they've got some top prospects in Washington too, and now Hershey. So you'll see how they match up.
Yep, absolutely. And a bit of side news, Dave Haxtell, our old pal, was fired by the Seattle Kraken. I'm not sure I saw it coming, in the sense that I thought it would have been done like the day the season ended. if it was going to happen. So to have it happen like a little bit later was the surprise to me.
Yeah, I think it's because of the exit interviews. I mean, that's what's being reported, that there were complaints, and I'm sure Matty Beniers is probably one of them. He had a terrible
Yeah.
year, and I'm going to guess that like Jordan Eberle is probably another one. He didn't have his greatest year, and he's a UFA, so he probably felt freely to speak, you know. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, Ron Francis, got to give him credit for noticing that and making the change. You know, Hackstall's good to a point. He's a good starter coach. He gets the culture going,
Yeah.
all that. But then there's a point where the players just kind of tire of playing for him. It's been proven, you know, 2 times now in the NHL. In college, different story, because you can't do anything. Like college players can't do anything to get a coach
Right.
out, but in the pros they can. So, you know, bit different.
Absolutely. We're going to take a look at the defensive pairings for the Flyers in game 1 versus game 82. We did it yesterday with the forward lines, and it was a really interesting exercise because you could kind of see like the ebbs and flows of the season in getting from point A to point B here. But so you look at game 1 for the Flyers, the defensive pairings were York and Sanheim, Stahl and Walker, and Zamula and Sealer. And the final defensive pairings for the Flyers, York and Sanheim, so same top pairing, which is
Hmm.
interesting. Sealer and Drysdale, obviously a new acquisition, and Zamula and Johnson, another new acquisition. So 2 of the 6 defensemen were new acquisitions, traded one of them away. And I think, you know, it is also telling, you know, Risto wasn't available at the beginning of the season, not available at the end of the season, and, you know, really wasn't a part of the story of the team this year.
No, but had he been part of the story, then I don't know, Zamula would have been getting scratched a lot, and Addard and Jennings
Mhm.
probably get no time. So that really, like I said, that's why this whole development cycle, there were things missed in this, and it was your temptation to put Johnson in there to try and make the playoffs. Well, that failed. It was, well, we're keeping Zamula in there so nobody else could have him, and then he turned out to be a good player. Uh,
Yeah.
and you know, you decided not to take him out of the lineup. The bad part is he was the only young guy you kept in the lineup and on the blue line, and that's the bad part.
Right. I would say there's more good than bad in that story because I think that it is evidence, you know, exhibit A, and we talked about this, you know, in our quick reactions at the end of the season, that it proved that when forced to do so, playing a prospect consistently, like they did with Zamula, he can figure out the game. Guys
Right,
can figure out the game and earn
right,
their spot in the lineup. That just because they had this weird waivers roster situation with him, they felt obligated to keep him at the NHL level. They
right.
played him and he flourished. And I think,
Yeah.
you know, if you don't take away that lesson from this, that to me is the problem. But I'm so happy for Zamula that
Oh
it
yeah,
turned
me
out
too.
this way.
Yeah, me too. I mean, and he was a big part. I mean, again, we'll see how many years Cam York ends up being the number one on the, you know, on the left side. I don't know if that's a permanent thing or not, but it was last year.
Yeah, and I think that is interesting in and of itself because, you know, when Provorov got traded, that was sort of the default assumption about what the top pairing was going to be, right? It was going to be
Right,
York and Sanheim, and things got moved around over the course of the season, but ultimately they landed back on York and Sanheim as that top pairing, and I think that you saw Cam York made a ton of progress this season. And so it sort of went from him being that top pairing guy by default to no, he really is a top pairing guy as this current blue line exists. I'm not saying in the grand scheme
yeah,
of the NHL, I'm saying as this team was constructed. And so it went from being by default to he earned it.
yeah, no question. Definitely hurt his offense though, because he, you know, last year he was on a better offensive pace than what he ended up this year.
Right.
So I don't know what that's going to do to him next year. We'll see. And we'll, you know, we're just, this is all going to be a thing that I'm not saying this is definite for next year, because I know the Flyers are going to be looking to to still upgrade their team. And if they think there's someone they can bring in that can play in the top pairing, John will do it. So I'll just say it worked for this year, and then we'll see.
Yeah, obviously we think Johnson isn't
No,
returning,
he's
but
not.
I think the biggest question for me based on this, beginning to the end of the season, we know that John Tortorella loves Nick Seeler. He was a third pairing guy at the beginning of the season, became a second pairing guy pretty consistently when he was healthy, wound up on that second pairing with Drysdale. And I'm not 100% sold on that pairing in particular, just because of the balance of skills. I think that they should try other options. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying maybe it's not the optimal pairing there. But I think that with Nick Seeler and how much Tortorella likes him versus what potential free agents they might try and slot in there versus the prospects, like where does Nick Seeler come out in the wash for next season?
Well, it's a good question because I don't know. Are you going to expect him to have 205 more blocks? It's a lot to ask of a person. I mean, he had
Yeah.
160 the year before in more, in a few more games. So he didn't have as many blocks. So are you going to expect him to block 250? Like it's going to, eat into his effectiveness at some point. So, to me, that's a big question. His ice time on the ice got upped a lot, and he is 30. He's not like 25.
Yeah.
So, I don't know how many of these years Nick Seeler can take, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big questions going into next season is how much do you want to count on him for almost completely owning that role
Right.
on the Flyers D. There's so much more to talk about with this, and the U18s are heading into the medal round, so we're going to talk about that coming up next.
Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED highlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Buying tickets to your favorite events like the NHL and NBA playoffs should not be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying those coveted NBA playoff seats. My favorite part of the Game Time app is that it's great for getting notified about last-minute flash deals. And Game Time lets you save even more with zone deals, where you pick a section and Game Time chooses the seat. Plus, they have all-in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout, and your tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Before we dig into the U18s and preview the medal rounds there, I do want to just talk about the Attard and Ginning of it all, because when we're talking about the blue lines from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, neither of them were part of that conversation. And while they did get some playing time toward the end of the season, when push came to shove in a critical game, they didn't. And so, and then there's also Emil Andre waiting in the wings,
Right.
which is a whole
He's
other
close.
thing.
Yeah.
And he was a scratch. He was on the roster, but a scratch in that first game to not on the roster. But, is he going to get a shot along with Attard and Ginning? And that math ain't mathin' with the number of
No, unless you're going to have 10 defensemen this
yeah.
year. Yeah.
Right. So I think that those are some of the biggest questions for the Flyers to answer this off season. And
I'm going to give you an
um,
answer that you're not going to like. Don't be shocked if Zamula is gone, if he gets traded.
yeah, I don't like it at all. I really, you said I'm not going to like it. I really don't like it.
I knew you
Just
wouldn't like it.
yeah, I think, mostly because I think Zamula has developed remarkably. And I literally just spent time in the last segment talking about that.
Yeah.
But again, I just cannot emphasize enough how much it shows when you give these guys a shot and they take advantage of it properly, you can get great things like you did with Zamula. And so to trade away your example of development in its purest form, like just seems short-sighted to me.
Well, hopefully it doesn't happen.
All right, so we will, of course, be trying to predict what the blue line will look like going into next season. We'll know more after free agency in July, of course. But and as we get closer to the season, because they could be signing some people closer to camp, et cetera. So things will change a lot over this
Oh,
summer
yeah.
on that front for sure. Looking at the U18 tournament, the round robin is over now, and the medal rounds begin on Thursday with the quarterfinal matchups. Semifinals are Saturday, and the final medal games are Sunday. So, based on the preliminary games and how everything came out in the wash, our quarterfinal matchups looking like a ton of fun. We have USA versus Switzerland, Canada versus Latvia, and then the two big ones are going to be Czechia versus Slovakia and Sweden versus Finland.
Yeah, Sweden versus Finland would be interesting. One thing that, I've pulled that's kind of fun is so tied for 14th in scoring, you have Melvin Fernstrand, Lucas Pettersson, and Alexander Zetterberg. That was the top line in the Five Nations when I covered the Five Nations in February.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, it does tell you that's a reason why I cover the Five Nations. Then you look at Emil Hemming, who's, starting to come through here, starting to bang in some goals. So he's,
Yeah.
he's another factor. Hellenius, while he is not scoring buckets of points every game, obviously he's well above a point a game. And because he's doing a lot of the dirty work because he's just good at everything. So Hellenius is a guy that's making, major gains here in this tournament. And I just,
Yeah.
I look at both teams. I like both teams. I feel like, I don't know, it's hard to, am I going to figure this team by who the U.S. didn't beat down the worst? Or am I going to figure this team by just their overall talent? I don't know. I mean, Victor Ekland's a pretty good player too. I watched him a lot in the Five Nations. I just feel like Finland's got more of a team
Mm-hmm.
thing going. And I'm going to say, I'm going to edge Finland on that one. Sweden, usually does well in this
Yeah.
tournament, but I just think Finland may have their number this year.
Yeah, it is interesting because, to your point, if you're looking at the stats for the tournament thus far, it's all USA and Canada through the 8 spot, right?
Right.
And then 9, 10, and 11 are Finns. You don't get down to those Swedes until 14.
Yeah, and the two Canadians are 2025 guys.
Right.
This team isn't scoring a lot. They just have balanced scoring. So that's a
Yeah.
whole different thing. So like if you want to have the Tej Ginla, argument, well, the argument is he's going to have to score more, I think, to move up in this draft. It's nice that he's got the last name and he had a good season, but this is go time here.
Yeah, and with 4 points in 3 games, it seems like on a normal day that's good, but for this tournament and
Could
to
be
move
better.
up in the rankings, it would need to be better.
Yeah, definitely could be better. Yeah, right now James Hagen's. We'll get to the other game, but yeah.
So yeah, the other big matchup, obviously, Czechia versus Slovakia, another geographic rivalry there, and neither of these teams has dominated per se. But I do think that given everything, and especially because Czechia lost to Kazakhstan in that overtime game for Kazakhstan, who's not even in the medal rounds, to get their one win of the tournament. I feel like that really burned Czechia a little bit, and they have some extra motivation to come back from that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Czechia has better players on paper. So
Hmm.
I'm with you. I think that you might be exactly right on that.
Yeah, and on the other hand, Slovakia's last game, they absolutely trounced Norway. And so, it was an easier style game for them. And so are they going to have a more difficult time coming back up to their peak level of performance right away? I think they will. It's just that will it take them, 10 minutes into the
It
game
might.
to get there?
It could. It could. That happens sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So I am really excited for these quarterfinal matchups. You mentioned some of the Swedes and we talked about the Finns, but is there anybody else in the tournament that has sort of popped that maybe was unexpected that's eligible for this year's draft, or it just seems like next year's draft are the guys that have kind of stood out?
Yeah, Jamiro Reber. Uh, like him a lot. He's been playing, I think, second line center, and he's done really well. He's not scoring a ton, but I think he's helping him his draft stock because he plays in all situations, and he's been really good out there. He's shown speed. He's a center, so yeah, I think he's a guy that I wrote about early in the year. Plays for HV71. Um,
That's a solid team.
that's a solid team that they always have pump out NHL talent, and he could play center or wing. So yeah, even though, and the funny thing about it is he gets a lot of pims, so he's a guy that could be kind of testy, but he's hit some posts. I feel bad for him. I think he could have a better tournament, but I've liked his play. Like I said, the Swedes were good. There's nobody else from any other country that's really jumping out. Nygaard is not in this tournament, so we didn't get to see him for Norway. So that's a little bit of a loss for this tournament. And then the interesting thing is, like with the U.S. guys, like James Hagens now has 16 points, 5 more, and he breaks Nikita Kucherov's record. And so while everybody's talking about, well, maybe the 2 Canadian guys, go first overall next year, he's like, I'm leading this tournament in points, and I'm gonna have the all-time record. So he still could go first overall next year too. You
Yeah.
know, uh, I think Trevor Connolly's done a long way for the U.S. to move up. I just wrote about Cole Hudson on NHLDraftBuzz.com, talking about how Lane has sort of paved the way for him. I think Cole. There's no doubt to me that Cole Hudson is a first rounder now. He just set the record for NTDP in points for a defenseman. That's a big deal. I think he's having a really good tournament. So there's a lot of talent in this tournament, but it's with a few different. It's mainly with 3 countries. Like that's really what you're seeing, and it's
Yeah,
not all next year.
yeah, I think it would be interesting if Cole got drafted by Montreal with their later first round pick.
Yeah, that would be cool. And Teddy Stiga had a massive game today. He had 4 points, 3 goals. So he's another one that, again, I was on him early as a first rounder. A lot of people are just warming up to him now, so I have a feeling he'll make a big jump too. So there's guys that will make big jumps from this tournament, but yeah, I don't know how much from other places because yeah, there are quite a few 2025 guys that stand out here. There's no doubt, but a lot of these people that you see are going to get drafted. It's just
Yeah.
that I'm talking about first like 2 or 3 rounds. Like even Zetterberg may not go until late third. So as an example, so the U.S. guys, while everybody wants to just say, oh, they're an all-star team, whatever, they are kind of proving. Like Brody Zemer, I put him in the first round for a reason. He's got 8 points in 4 games. He almost had a nice shorthanded goal. Like he's not in there just because he's part of a super team. He actually really makes things happen. And Yzerman didn't do much last game, but he still has 6 goals, and he'll still end up leading that team in goals when it's all said and done, I think. But I don't know. We'll see. Hagens has really gone up another level, which is impressive.
Yeah, all of this is interesting. We'll come back next week to talk about how the tournament played out and if any of the rankings were affected by it then. We do have a bunch of your questions for the mailbag, including a couple of good trade proposals. So
All
we'll
right.
get to that coming up next.
All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flag on the play. You've already talked about that, but there's so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you can work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. Unique stickers you could trade with a friend to compete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for a treasure or robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on the Google app or App Store or the App Store. Game on.
All right, getting to your mailbag questions here. The first one comes from Mike. He says, "Hey gang, enjoyed your assessment on Sam Dickinson with what you guys thought of him and where he landed. However, I worry if he is on the board when we pick at 12, the Flyers will take him given Jonesy's history with London and Hunter when there will be better players available. Do you agree? And what are your thoughts?"
Yeah, I agree. If he were there, they might take him. I think he's still going to go earlier, but he's a good defenseman. I'm just, when I'm looking for a top 10 defenseman, I just don't want him to be a second power play guy. That's really the main thing about this. If the Flyers got him, I wouldn't kill the Flyers for getting him because he's still going to be a good defenseman. It's just I'm kind of looking for that really awesome defenseman, and those are hard to find, quite frankly. So I wouldn't worry about it right now. Don't lose any sleep on it.
Yeah, I think that it wouldn't be a bad pick. It would
No.
just, be a circumstantial pick at at that slot. So I'm not worried about it either. We've got a couple of trade proposals here. Randy says a Flyers trade with the Sabres, where the Flyers get Peyton Krebs and the Sabres get Joel Farabee and Scott Lawton. But the Flyers would also maybe get some draft picks or other pieces to kind of balance it out.
Yeah, I don't think that's outrageous. I know that Keith Jones likes Peyton Krebs. We've heard enough about that through all different sources and ways. But I don't know now that Buffalo has changed coaches how much they're going to change their team. So maybe Lindy, if he likes Lawton, then that could be a possibility. Again, I hesitate moving Farabee out of town. I do like Krebs a lot, so I don't think it's outrageous. I think they have a lot of picks, so they would have to put a pick or so in there, maybe a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it happening.
Yeah, I think the coaching change in Buffalo is going to have a big effect on potential deals like this because it'll be kind of a different system with different goals. I might not have said it before they hired Lindy, to be honest.
Right.
But I think that change in Buffalo makes this a little bit more feasible. And there definitely would have to be, I would say, a second thrown in as well to make it balance out.
Yeah.
At L Valentina suggested, would you trade Rasmus Ristolainen and Konechny for Zegras or McTavish and a draft pick?
Anaheim would hang up the phone. No disrespect. They're not trading McTavish. The only reason they're willing to possibly trade Zegras is because he held out, and it kind of annoyed management. So that's the whole thing, Pat Verbeek. So that's the whole thing with that. So you're not going to see that trade. And Ristolainen, he's got to really prove his health. I don't think anybody's picking him up until they know he could play again in this league. So I don't think he would even be the defenseman that would be going back. So, this one, don't see any of these things happening. Zegras to the Flyers, maybe, but it would have to be a whole different kind of deal.
Maybe. I mean, and I was trying to think, even if you swap out Zamula for Ristolainen, it's still not anything that would get McTavish.
Right, and they're going to have to pay for Konechny on a new contract, or he's going to risk, or they only have him for a year. They're not a playoff team yet, and that's the other problem, having Konechny in there going their way.
Yeah, I think so. Chris Fiore commented, "Hey guys, Tanner Laczynski is a UFA after the playoffs. I agree they should give him a shot next year. But with Torts apparently not liking him, are you sure the Flyers will re-sign him? And even if they want to, why would Tanner sign after how he's been treated and coming off a good year where he could sign and get a shot somewhere else?
Yeah, he probably won't. I mean, wouldn't shock me if, his agent calls Columbus. He was great with Ohio State. That's a team that needs talent. That's what I would do if I were his agent. Yeah, I don't think he's going to even want to come back. But I would, if I were the Flyers, I would try and at least get him on a camp invite if for some reason he's not signed, because his good play is still something that has worked in your system. But again, I think some other teams might have interest in him. We'll see.
Yeah, I think, our opinion that they should try and move him up there as 4C is like because we think he's earned it and not necessarily what we think will happen.
Right.
But yeah,
if there was an alternate universe, then that's what we think could happen.
I mean, I think they should roll out the red carpet for him and be like, we're going to give you a solid NHL contract and give you a real shot at this. It's yours to lose.
Yeah.
And
I'd like to see it too, but I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but hopefully we will see it come to pass. Our last question of the day, David wants to know, given what we know now about what happened to the Caps in the playoffs, would we have wanted the Flyers to make the playoffs anyway?
I mean, you would have, only because the team went out of their way to try and make the playoffs. That's the only reason why you would have. And then whatever little experience the players would have gotten, even if they got swept, they're still getting experience. That's the reason why you would have wanted it. But I wouldn't have leaned so far into that direction. You know my story. So I wouldn't have tried to really align that. But only because you put so much resources and energy into doing it, yes, you would have wanted to make it.
Right. And I think the Caps getting swept is completely different than the Flyers getting swept in that scenario.
Yeah, it is.
You expect the Caps to step it up and at least win a game, right?
I mean, Ovechkin had no points. None.
Right. And that is like, the disappointment would have been severe. I think with the Flyers, it would have been a lot more understandable. But also, I kind of think the Flyers matched up against the Rangers a little better.
Yeah, they might have won a game
to begin with.
Yeah.
So just given how they played against the Rangers this season, even when they lost, like for the most part, they played decently. So
no, I think that's fair.
Yeah. So I think the matchup would have been different and the expectations would have been different.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. So I don't know. I'm kind of 50-50 on what I would have wanted it, though. I think I would have wanted it for them just because the players I know were working so hard to make it happen. And it would have just been good for them from a psychology perspective.
Right.
All right, that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. We're going to dig more into the Flyers draft strategy and look at what the meetings look like or should look like for the Flyers as they're putting together their final draft boards. Plus, we're going to do a prospect profile of Tanner Howe, who's a possibility for that second first-round draft pick that the Flyers have. So excited to talk about him. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. If you've got mailbag questions you want us to answer on the show, you can do so by sending us a message on Twitter at LockedOnFlyers. You can email us at LockedOnFlyers@gmail.com or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24 channel on YouTube. It's now available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great day, everyone.